They're counting on you being too distracted, too busy with holiday shopping, family gatherings, vacation planning to monitor what's developing in metals markets, too occupied to notice the historic setup building during this quiet week. They're underestimating us. We're watching gold maintain $4,590. We're seeing silver hold $74.70. And we recognize these holiday levels for what they are, the last chance to position before the January explosion. Earlier today, I got a phone call from someone at one of the biggest precious metal merchants in Western Canada. I won't share his identity. What matters is what he revealed to me. His exact words were, "Monday shattered every sales record we've ever had. We surpassed our previous best by 50%. That earlier record happened during the 2021 social media buying frenzy. We're witnessing more than just strong interest. We're watching panic buying unfold. Consider the implications." During holiday time, when families gather and celebrate, coin shop customers are rushing in with such force that they're shattering historical benchmarks. This isn't guesswork. This isn't fear of missing out. This is primal preservation behavior emerging. Those with insight recognize what's approaching in 2026, and they're securing their positions before the opportunity vanishes. Allow me to break down precisely what's occurring in the markets currently, because traditional financial journalism is entirely missing the point. They're publishing pieces about seasonal retail and year-end investment adjustments. They're overlooking the most significant precious metal opportunity in recorded history. The yellow metal has pierced above its ascending, broadening wedge barrier on the daily time frame. For anyone unfamiliar with chart interpretation, here's the simple version. This formation indicates growing price swings within a positive framework. It signifies the fluctuations are becoming wider, but they're expanding upward. The surge past $4,280 verified that this metal isn't merely pausing, it's taking off. However, the yellow metal isn't where the real action is. It does what it always does. It's the foundation. It's the reliable constant. The white metal is where attention belongs. This shiny element is higher by 145% so far this year. In October, it demolished a 45-year barrier that stood since 1980. And what occurred after breaking that ceiling? It sped up. The increases aren't slowing. They're gaining intensity. The force is strengthening, not weakening. And the chart structure on the daily time frame shows something that should frighten anyone still watching from the sidelines. We're seeing an Adam and Eve formation. We're observing an inverted head and shoulders. We're looking at a cup and handle that exploded above $54.50 and drove prices to $70 within weeks. These aren't coincidental markings on a display. These are formations that have forecasted significant movements for generations, and they're all indicating the identical direction, upward. The near-term objective for the white metal based on the ascending broadening wedge formation sits somewhere between $80 and $90. But here's what market experts hesitate to articulate publicly. That objective will climb as prices advance. The formation widens, the fluctuation intensifies, the upper limit continues ascending, and past $90, there's nothing but empty space until we reach three figures. $100 per troy ounce isn't wishful thinking. It's a mathematical certainty propelled by limited availability, manufacturing requirements, and an influx of individual investor capital that's only starting. If you believe the advance is finished, you're not watching closely. We're in the opening stages of a once-in-a-lifetime movement. Now, allow me to clarify why the holiday scheduling of this advancement is so crucial, because this is where the snare has been positioned. The exchange activity right now is minimal. The major players are absent from their workstations. The automated systems are operating on default settings. In typical conditions, shallow participation creates erratic, aimless movement. But that's not our current situation. We're watching the yellow metal maintain near $4,190 despite minimal activity. We're seeing the white metal rest at $74.70, not because liquidation force is building, but because purchasers are preparing before the subsequent climb. This is remarkable. In shallow conditions, valuations should be exposed to retreats. They should be drifting downward as the absence of purchasing force allows natural decline. Instead, valuations are remaining solid. They're stabilizing in a narrow band, gathering momentum like a tightened coil. What does this reveal about underlying interest? It reveals that purchasing power is substantial. It reveals that whenever valuations decrease, even marginally, purchasers are prepared to acquire the commodity. It reveals that the protective capital movements into these metals aren't a passing occurrence driven by news cycles. They represent a foundational transformation in how investors perceive these holdings. The globe is transforming. The previous monetary structure is disintegrating, and individuals are reacting by transferring their resources into the most ancient form of currency humanity knows. This won't cease in January. This will intensify. Allow me to present the fundamental scenario that's propelling this advancement because the chart formations are merely the visible layer. They're the manifestation of deeper mechanisms at play. The American currency is declining. This isn't subjective opinion. This is verifiable information. The anticipation that the Federal Reserve will commence reducing borrowing costs as rising prices cool and economic expansion slows is creating downward force on the greenback. And when the American currency weakens, these metals become more appealing to foreign purchasers. They become less expensive in alternative currencies. Interest increases automatically. This is fundamental market mechanics. And the current administration has communicated clearly about preferring a central bank leader who favors rate reductions. This message has been delivered publicly. It's broadcasting to markets that monetary strategy is about to change in a manner that's exceptionally favorable for precious metals. But there's additional context. The international political climate is worsening quickly, and traditional journalism is barely acknowledging it. American military forces have executed operations in Nigeria. This is verified. The United States is directing a maritime restriction of Venezuelan petroleum vessels. These aren't minor regional disputes. These are moves that demonstrate readiness by America to extend military influence across numerous continents concurrently. This increases concerns of worldwide instability. This pushes resources into protective holdings. This is combustible material for the precious metal advance. Now, I want to address something that traditional analysts decline to recognize: the availability circumstance, because this is the concealed reality that financial institutions don't want you to comprehend. The planet's dedicated white metal reserves are largely depleted. Let me state that again. The accessible material, the premium quality reserves that made extraction profitable for 100 years, they're exhausted. What persists are inferior quality reserves that require more capital to extract. What persists are mixed deposits where this metal is a secondary product of copper or lead or zinc extraction. The planet cannot simply manufacture more of this commodity to satisfy increasing interest. The availability is limited at a fundamental geological level, and additionally, manufacturing requirement for this element is surging. Solar panel producers are utilizing this element at a pace that nobody anticipated 5 years back. Every solar component needs conductive paste. Every battery-powered automobile needs this element for its electrical pathways. The sustainable power transformation that administrations globally are advancing is a consumption apparatus for this commodity, and there isn't adequate supply underground to fulfill both manufacturing requirement and financial requirement at present valuations. This is why valuations must climb. This isn't guesswork. This is fundamental economics. The shortfall is genuine. The scarcity is approaching. And the investors who grasp this are securing positions now during the seasonal pause before the subsequent wave commences. I contacted another informant yesterday, an administrator at a retail precious metal network with outlets across Canada and the northwestern United States. He revealed that commodity units sold in December are higher by 150% versus 12 months prior. 150%. The individual investor is awakening. The modest purchaser, the individual who enters a dealer with several $100s, they're overwhelming the market. And here's the reality about individual investor interest. It persists. When an individual investor purchases physical commodity, they typically retain it. They aren't actively trading. They aren't seeking to exchange it for quick gains. They're gathering. They're constructing a reserve that they plan to transfer to their offspring. This commodity is being withdrawn from circulation indefinitely. Every unit that enters a residential vault is a unit that won't be obtainable for manufacturing utilization. Every unit that a modest investor secures is a unit that intensifies the availability squeeze. Let me share information about someone named Jay Moore. He's 33 years old, resides in Arizona, operates as a logistics supervisor. For 10 years, whenever Jay wanted to put money to work, he accessed an application on his device and purchased equities or digital currencies. That was his pattern. That was what his peers were instructed to do. But 60 days back, something shifted. Jay began consuming online content about this white metal. He began comprehending the underlying factors. He began recognizing what we've been discussing for years, and he reached a conclusion. He entered his vehicle, he traveled to his neighborhood dealer, and he acquired his initial 3 units of physical commodity for approximately $150. Since that moment, Jay has gathered roughly 60 units of ornaments and currency pieces. He secures them in a residential vault. And when I questioned him about his intentions, he articulated something that should alarm every financial institution that's been controlling this market. He stated, "I understand the valuation is climbing rapidly, but I have zero intention of liquidating." J isn't unusual. J represents the visible portion of a massive phenomenon. There are thousands, potentially millions of individuals just like him throughout North America who are experiencing the identical understanding. They're understanding that equities can become worthless. They're understanding that digital currencies can be compromised or prohibited. They're understanding that financial accounts can be restricted. But this white metal is physical. This commodity is authentic. This element has been currency for 5 millennia, and unlike electronic holdings, this metal can be secured, defended, and transferred to subsequent generations without any third-party exposure. As Jay expressed it, I simply want to possess something real where I can safeguard myself and assist my relatives after I'm deceased. That isn't the declaration of someone chasing gains. That's the declaration of someone who has abandoned confidence in the existing framework, and when millions of individuals abandon confidence simultaneously, the requirement for tangible holdings becomes astronomical. There's another account I want to present. Michael DeCrane is 46 years old, resides in Indianapolis, operates as the operations director at a video conferencing corporation. For him, gathering this commodity began as a pastime to experience with his 7-year-old child. They would visit dealers during journeys, 5 or 6 locations across various states, just to examine what they possessed and include a piece here and there. It was a connecting activity. It was something physical and an existence of displays and alerts. But throughout the previous 8 years, Michael's pastime evolved into a substantial holding. He gathered approximately $60,000 worth of pieces and ingots. And here's what makes Michael's account educational. He was monitoring the yellow to white metal proportion. This April, when the yellow metal was exchanging at roughly 100 times the white metal, Michael identified that the white metal was historically underpriced. He purchased more. Then, as white metal valuations jumped and that proportion decreased, he liquidated approximately half his holdings. This is what informed capital does. They don't just purchase and maintain blindly. They monitor the connections between holdings. They identify when the white metal is inexpensive relative to yellow metal and they gather. Then when it outperforms and the proportion tightens, they secure gains or exchange into the yellow metal to maintain their buying capacity. This is the approach I've been instructing for years, and it functions. The yellow to white metal proportion has been declining consistently as the white metal outperforms. At the 1980 summit, the proportion decreased to approximately 15-1. Right now, I need to confront something that doubters enjoy emphasizing because I understand they're observing and anticipating any justification to reject what's occurring. They claim that this white metal is susceptible to explosive and collapse patterns. They claim that it tends to surge dramatically and then plummet, and you understand what? They're accurate. That has occurred previously. In 1980, it spiked to $50 and then collapsed. In 2011, it reached $49 and then retreated. The doubters reference these instances as evidence that this commodity is too unstable, too hazardous, too risky for legitimate investors. But here's what they deliberately overlook. The Purchasing Power Adjusted Summit from 1980 exceeds $200 per unit in contemporary currency. This metal would need to more than triple from current levels just to equal that summit. We're nowhere close to speculative excess territory by historical benchmarks. The individuals who purchased at $50 in 1980 and maintained it weren't incorrect about this commodity. They were premature. And being premature in a long-term positive market isn't an error. It's an advantage. The inquiry isn't whether this metal will experience a retreat at some moment. The inquiry is whether you'll be situated to benefit before that retreat occurs. And presently, with valuations at $74.70 and the technicals indicating $100, the potential reward versus potential loss is overwhelmingly favorable for purchasers. Allow me to guide you through the technical levels that matter currently, because accuracy is essential when you're maneuvering a market this unstable. On the 2-hour time frame, this commodity is exchanging just beneath the peak of its ascending pathway. We observed a formation with an extended upper tail around 75.40, which indicates hesitation, but not genuine liquidation. This is beneficial. This is the market regaining composure. The valuation is maintaining well above the 50-day exponential moving average near $70, which is functioning as flexible foundation. The pathway that has directed this metal higher since mid-month remains unbroken. Any decreases are acknowledging the center of that pathway. The initial barrier level is $75.40. Beyond that, we have $76.90, and the upper pathway objective is $78. On the lower side, foundation sits at $72.65 with stronger foundation at $70.50, which is the previous consolidation area. The relative strength indicator is in the high 60s, displaying robust force but cooling from excessive conditions. This is precisely what you want to observe in a healthy upward trend. The approach here is straightforward. Purchase decreases near $72.70 with a protective exit beneath $70 and an objective of $76.90. That provides you a potential reward versus potential loss proportion that any expert trader would appreciate. For the yellow metal, the scenario is equally favorable. Now, allow me to clarify why January 2026 will be explosive, because the arrangement is ideal. During the seasonal period, precious metals have been gathering energy. Activity is minimal, but valuations are steady. The optimistic investors are gathering quietly while the major institutions are absent. When the fresh year commences, multiple events occur simultaneously. First, institutional capital returns online. The speculative funds, the retirement funds, the government wealth funds, they all come back to their trading workstations with fresh capital to allocate. They examine the charts, they observe the breakthroughs, they observe the force, and they enter aggressively. Second, tax-motivated liquidation concludes. Throughout December, some investors liquidate losing holdings to balance capital gains. This generates artificial liquidation force that suppresses valuations. In January, that force vanishes. Third, fresh year allocation choices are executed. Investment boards convene and determine how to arrange for the approaching year. With equities expensive, bonds producing less than rising prices, and international risk climbing, precious metals become an evident selection. The capital movements into these metals will increase dramatically. The experts who analyze precious metals are finally beginning to acknowledge what we've been articulating for years. The market attitude has transformed aggressively optimistic. Spot valuations above $70 aren't a passing spike, it's a fresh foundation. The 145% year-to-date increase has ignited renewed interest for the yellow metal as well. Both commodities are being perceived as essential protections in an unstable macro climate. The relationship is powerful. When the white metal advances, it confirms the yellow metal. When the yellow metal advances, it provides shelter for the white metal. They reinforce each other in a beneficial pattern that compensates holders of both commodities. But here's what troubles me, and I need to be transparent with you about this. The exchange activity in derivative contracts linked to the iShares Trust has surged to the maximum level since the social media powered surge of 2021. That's a cautionary indicator. It informs me that speculative participation is climbing. It informs me that some individuals are purchasing this commodity simply because the valuation is climbing without comprehending the underlying factors. This category of purchasing can create violent retreats when the force diminishes. I'm not claiming the advance is finished. I'm claiming that instability will intensify. There will be days when valuations decline 5% or even 10%. There will be headlines declaring that the speculative excess has exploded. And when those days arrive, you need to be ready mentally. You need to comprehend that retreats are beneficial. They eliminate the uncertain holders. They reload the mechanism for the subsequent advancement. The individuals who panic liquidate during retreats are the identical individuals who repurchase at elevated valuations later. Don't be that individual. The underlying argument for this white metal has never been more robust. Allow me to present it one final time so there's no misunderstanding. Manufacturing requirement is increasing, propelled by solar, battery vehicles, and electronics. Financial requirement is increasing, propelled by rising price concerns, currency weakness, and international instability. Availability is limited because the accessible reserves are exhausted. The shortfall between availability and requirement is expanding every year. The valuation must climb to stabilize the market. There's no alternative mathematical result. The financial institutions can control paper valuations in the near term. They can increase collateral obligations, they can modify the regulations, but they cannot manufacture this commodity. They cannot create this element from nothing. And as long as the physical shortfall exists, the valuation will continue climbing. For those of you who already possess physical commodity, who have been gathering for years, who listen when we were advocating strongly at $25 and $30 and $40, congratulations. You're being compensated for your patience and certainty. But don't become satisfied. Don't presume the journey is finished. We're heading to $100 and probably past. The inquiry isn't whether you should maintain. The inquiry is whether you should increase your holdings on any retreat. For those of you who are fresh to this, who are just discovering this market, who are experiencing fear of missing out as you observe the valuation climb daily, I have a communication for you as well. It isn't too late. Yes, this commodity is higher by 145% this year. Yes, you missed the simple gains from $25 to $70, but if it reaches $100, you still have 35% potential from current levels. If it reaches $150, you have 100% potential. If it reaches $200, which is just the purchasing power adjusted 1980 summit, you have 170% potential. The simple capital has been captured, but there's still substantial capital to be captured. The essential element is to purchase physical commodity whenever feasible. Don't depend on paper commitments. Don't rely on exchange traded funds that might resolve in currency during an emergency. Don't maintain futures agreements that can be terminated by exceptional circumstance provisions. Possess the commodity, maintain it in your control, secure it in a vault that you manage. This is the sole method to guarantee that your resources are defended when the framework finally fractures. And make no error, the framework is fracturing. The fissures are observable for anyone who examines. The obligation levels are unmanageable. The currency is being diminished. The international political structure is fragmenting. The previous regulations no longer function. We're entering a fresh period, and the individuals who possess tangible holdings will prosper, while the individuals who maintain paper commitments will experience hardship. I want to conclude with one final consideration. The seasonal period is a moment when most individuals focus on relatives, on celebration, on pausing from the pressure of routine existence. There's nothing incorrect with that. Appreciate this moment. Be engaged with the individuals you care about, but don't allow your awareness to diminish completely. The markets don't rest. The mechanisms propelling precious metals higher don't pause, and the opportunity to arrange yourself for the 2026 increase is diminishing with each passing day. When you return from the seasonal break, when you access your workstation in January and examine the valuation, I want you to recall this message. I want you to recall that I communicated to you precisely what was going to occur. I want you to recall that the arrangement was observable for anyone willing to look. The momentum is gathering. The mechanism is tightening. The breakthrough is